The directive principles of state policy are a cornerstone of India's social and economic framework. Enshrined in Part 4 between Articles 36 and 51 of the Indian Constitution, they act as a roadmap for the government to strive towards while formulating policies and enacting laws. Unlike fundamental rights which are justiciable, that is, enforceable by the courts, directive principles of state policy are not directly enforceable. However, they serve as a moral and political compass guiding the state in establishing a just and equitable society. The directive principles are essentially guidelines that the state should consider when making laws. They outline the ideals that a welfare state should aspire to achieve. These principles encompass a wide range of areas including social justice, economic justice, political justice, and environmental protection. By incorporating these principles into policy and legislation, the government strives to create a society that is fair, equal, and prosperous for all its citizens. Moving on to the objectives of the directive principles of state policy. They include establishing a welfare state. The directive principles of state policies aim to create a social order where the state actively promotes the well-being of its citizens. This includes ensuring basic necessities like food, clothing, and shelter for all. Secure a social order for people's welfare. These principles emphasize building a society that prioritizes the collective good. This involves promoting social harmony, reducing inequalities, and ensuring equal opportunities for everyone. Create an egalitarian society. The directive principles of state policy advocate for a society free from discrimination and where everyone has equal access to resources and opportunities. This includes eliminating social evils like untouchability and ensuring equal rights for all citizens. The directive principles of state policy can be broadly classified into 4 categories. First one is social justice, second one is economic justice, third one is political justice, and fourth one is other important principles. Social justice. Under the social justice, the articles emphasize the importance of social equality and justice. Key provisions include under Article 38, the state shall strive to promote the welfare of the people by securing a social order permeated by justice, social, economic, and political. Under Article 39, the state shall ensure that the citizens, men and women, equally have the right to an adequate means of livelihood and that wealth is not concentrated in a few hands. Under Article 41, the state shall make effective provision for securing the right to work, education, and public assistance in cases of unemployment, old age, sickness, and disablement. Under Article 42, the state shall make provision for securing just and humane conditions of work and maternity relief. Economic justice. These articles focus on promoting economic equity and preventing the concentration of wealth. Key provisions include under Article 39b, the state shall direct its policy towards securing that the ownership and control of material resources are distributed to serve the common good. Under Article 39c, the state shall ensure that the operation of the economic system does not result in the concentration of wealth and means of production. Under Article 43, the state shall endeavour to secure by suitable legislation or economic organization or in any other way to all workers a living wage and a decent standard of life. Political justice. These articles seek to ensure that all citizens have the opportunity to participate in the political process and that the governance system is just. Key provisions include under Article 44, the state shall endeavour to secure for the citizens a uniform civil code throughout the territory of India. Under Article 40, the state shall take steps to organize village panchayats and endow them with necessary powers and authority to enable them to function as units of self-government. Under Article 50, the state shall take steps to separate the judiciary from the executive in the public services of the state. Other important principles. These articles cover a wide range of other significant areas such as education, environment, and international peace. Key provisions include under Article 45, the state shall endeavour to provide early childhood care and education for all children until they complete the age of 6 years. Under Article 48A, the state shall endeavour to protect and improve the environment and to safeguard the forests and wildlife of the country. Under Article 51, the state shall promote international peace and security and maintain just and honorable relations between nations. Moving on to the key characteristics of directive principles of state policy. Unlike fundamental rights which are guaranteed by the Constitution and can be enforced through courts, the directive principles of state policy are not directly enforceable. This means that the citizens cannot file a lawsuit for violation of a directive principle. The directive principles create a moral and political obligation for the state to strive towards fulfilling the enshrined ideals. These principles guide the government in policy making and legislation. The directive principles act as a framework for formulating policies and enacting laws. The government considers these principles while developing new initiatives and regulations. While not directly enforceable, the judiciary can use the directive principles of state policy to interpret existing laws. If a law is ambiguous, judges may consider the relevant directive principle of state policy to arrive at a fair and just interpretation that aligns with the envisioned social and economic order. The directive principles hold immense significance in shaping India's future. They serve several crucial purposes. Vision for a just and equitable society. The directive principles of state policy provide a blueprint for a society built on principles of social justice, economic equality, and political participation. They outline a vision where everyone has equal opportunity to thrive and contribute to the nation's progress. By outlining social and economic goals like securing a just and humane work environment, promoting education, and protecting the environment, the directive principles set long-term development objectives for the government. These principles guide policy making in a direction that fosters inclusive and sustainable growth. The directive principles of state policy act as a benchmark for evaluating government policies and initiatives. Citizens and civil society organizations can use these principles to assess whether government actions are aligned with the envisioned social and economic order. Unlike rigid goals, the directive principles of state policy acknowledge the need for progressive realization. They recognize that achieving some objectives might require a phased approach based on the available resources and evolving economic conditions. This allows the government to prioritize goals and implement them strategically. While significant, the directive principles of state policy also face certain limitations. The primary limitation is their non-justiciability. Citizens cannot directly approach the court for violation of a directive principle. This makes it challenging to hold the government accountable for inaction or policies that contradict directive principles of state policy. The vast array of directive principles can sometimes create ambiguity regarding priority. Balancing and harmonizing diverse principles like securing a uniform civil code with respecting cultural rights requires careful consideration. The effectiveness of directive principles hinges heavily on the political will of the government and available resources. Implementing social welfare programs or achieving universal education, for example, requires significant financial investments. Moving on to the recent developments and issues. The interpretation and application of directive principles of state policy are constantly evolving. There is an ongoing debate on whether certain directive principles of state policies like the right to education should be made justiciable to ensure their implementation. This debate highlights the desire for stronger enforcement mechanisms. In the era of economic liberalization and globalization, there is a need to balance the ideals of directive principles of state policy with economic growth. The government must find ways to promote economic activity while ensuring social welfare and environmental protection. The directive principles of state policy can play a crucial role in achieving the sustainable goals adopted by the United Nations. Principles like promoting environmental sustainability and gender equality align well with the Sustainable Development Goals, providing a framework for inclusive development. Moving forward, the directive principles of state policy are a cornerstone of India's social and economic development. They provide a vision for a just and equitable society, set long-term development goals, and serve as a benchmark for evaluating policies. While limitations exist, the directive principles of state policy remain a vital tool for guiding the government towards a more prosperous and inclusive future. Striking a balance between directive principles of state policy, fundamental rights, and practical considerations is essential for effective governance. Let's see a few additional points. The case of State of Kerala vs. Thomas Chacko in 1969 is a prime example of directive principles of state policy being used for interpretation. In this case, the Supreme Court used directive principles of state policy related to securing a right to work and public assistance to interpret a law concerning unemployment benefits. The directive principles of state policy reflect the ideals of Gandhian socialism, which emphasizes social justice, decentralization of power, and economic self-sufficiency for villages. Similar concepts exist in other constitutions. The South African Constitution, for example, includes socio-economic rights that are justiciable, offering a different approach. The judiciary plays a crucial role in interpreting directive principles of state policy and their application in specific contexts. As society evolves, the judiciary's interpretation of directive principles of state policy can also adapt to changing needs. To conclude, the directive principles of state policy play a vital role in shaping India's social and economic landscape. By providing a framework for achieving social and economic justice, they guide the government towards creating a more equitable and prosperous society for all its citizens. While not directly enforceable, the directive principles of state policy serves as a moral compass, reminding the state of its obligation to work towards the well-being of its people. As India continues to develop, the directive principles of state policy will remain a vital tool for achieving its vision of a just and inclusive society.